This deep dive takes us into a story that is, well, incredibly disturbing, to be honest.
Yeah.
We're going to be examining a personal account of a sudden and brutal attack and the disorienting aftermath of trying to navigate a system that seems,
Right.
at times,
Yeah.
designed to fail victims. And the story centers around a man named Bruce.
Okay.
Bruce is a therapist known for his gentleness and empathy, and he found himself living in a boarding house in a rough part of Durham, North Carolina, after full eviction.
Right from the start, we see Bruce in a very vulnerable position.
Yeah.
I mean, this boarding house wasn't exactly a haven of peace and quiet.
No.
It was in a high-crime area. He had already been robbed multiple times while living there.
Right.
And there was this general feeling of unease surrounding the place. So,
Yeah.
he was already living with a sense of precariousness even before this attack happened.
And then comes the attack itself.
Yeah.
This seemingly random encounter on the stairs with a woman quickly escalates into a brutal and unprovoked assault. Punches him repeatedly in the face, leaving him with lacerations and bleeding from his nose and his mouth.
It's important to note the psychological impact of this kind of sudden violence.
Yeah.
The shock that Bruce must felt, the instinct not to fight back.
Right.
The almost surreal nature of it all.
Yeah.
It speaks to the disorienting power of trauma,
Yeah.
People often expect a fight or flight response.
Right.
But sometimes the brain just freezes.
Yeah. There are some details in Bruce's account that don't quite fit the typical assault narrative.
Okay.
For instance, the attacker locks herself in the room with him.
Mm.
And doing the struggle, he's worried about hurting her.
Wow.
It's all very unsettling.
Absolutely. And then there's that question that the attacker asks,
Yeah.
why do you keep calling me?
Right.
Bruce is genuinely confused by this, which suggests a few possibilities. It could be mistaken identity, maybe a drug-fueled delusion, or perhaps something even more sinister.
Bruce is bleeding profusely.
But there's this chilling lack of urgency from the police.
And here's a detail that really underscores the problem. The only blood at the scene is Bruce's.
Wow.
There's no physical evidence connecting the attacker to the crime scene.
That lack of physical evidence, coupled with the police's apparent lack of concern, really feeds into the emotional and psychological impact on Bruce. I mean, he's already dealing with the trauma of the attack itself.
Right.
And now he's grappling with the feeling of being disbelieved.
Yeah.
The sense that the police don't find this unusual or worth investigating properly.
Yeah.
That can be incredibly isolating and disheartening.
There's also this earlier conversation that Bruce had with his landlord, Jimmy, about dissociative identity disorder.
Okay.
Bruce had used his childhood nickname Brucey as an example of how someone with DD might have different personalities with different names.
Right.
So that conversation, seemingly innocuous at the time,
Right.
becomes significant later on.
Okay.
It adds a layer of complexity to the narrative.
Interesting.
It's also important to remember the context of Bruce's living situation.
Yeah.
He's in this boarding house
Right.
located in a high-crime area known for drug use and violence.
Yeah.
He had even been robbed at knife point while living there.
Oh, wow.
It all adds to the sense of vulnerability he was already experiencing.
Exactly. This pre-existing vulnerability makes the attack even more impactful.
Right.
He's already on edge, living in a state of heightened awareness, and then this violent, seemingly random assault just shatters any remaining sense of safety he might have had.
And it's crucial to highlight that Bruce was a gentle person by nature. He had a long-standing vow to never use fear as a weapon and had dedicated his life to helping others as a therapist.
Right.
This contrast makes the brutality of the attack even more jarring.
Absolutely. This contrast between his inherent gentleness and the violence inflicted upon him underscores the profound injustice of the situation.
Yeah.
It makes you wonder, why is someone who embodies kindness and empathy targeted in such a cruel way?
Before the attack, Bruce was waiting for a friend to visit.
Okay.
So he had his door partially open.
Right.
He then heard a voice calling out, "Where's Bruce?" from the hallway.
This seemingly innocuous question is what sets the entire chain of events in motion.
Yeah.
It's a chilling reminder of how quickly things can escalate from ordinary to terrifying.
Thinking it was his friend, Bruce stepped out into the hallway and responded, "I'm Bruce."
Oh, okay.
However, the person standing on the stairs wasn't who he was expecting.
Uh-oh.
It was a woman he didn't recognize.
This moment of mistaken identity adds another layer to the story. It raises the possibility that the attacker might have been looking for someone else entirely,
Right.
making the assault on Bruce even more senseless and tragic.
The woman on the stairs,
Yeah.
a complete stranger, suddenly charged at Bruce,
Oh, wow.
She burst into his room, slamming the door shut and locking it behind her.
This sudden escalation of aggression is truly terrifying.
Yeah.
It underscores the unpredictable nature of violence and the vulnerability we all face in the face of such irrational rage.
Before Bruce could even process what was happening, the woman began raining blows down on his face.
Oh my God.
He was caught completely off guard, dazed by the suddenness and the ferocity of the attack.
The fact that she locked the door behind her is particularly disturbing.
Yeah.
It suggests a level of intentionality to the attack.
Right.
This wasn't a random act of violence in a public space,
Right.
but a calculated assault within the confines of his own home.
As she continued to hit him, she yelled, "Why do you keep calling me?"
Wow.
Bruce, bleeding and confused, could only respond, "Who are you?"
The attacker's question, "Why do you keep calling me?" is particularly unsettling.
Yeah.
It suggests either a level of delusion on her part, or perhaps even a deliberate attempt to gaslight Bruce,
Right.
making him question his own reality.
The attack happened so fast.
Yeah.
Bruce, still in shock, stumbled back as the woman continued to punch him in the face.
Oh, jeez.
There wasn't much space between the door and the couch, and he fell onto it, disoriented and bleeding.
It's important to note that Bruce didn't fight back.
Right.
His instinct wasn't to meet violence with violence,
Right.
but to protect himself and try to de-escalate the situation.
Right.
This is consistent with his personality and his vow to never use fear as a weapon.
In that moment, Bruce was more concerned with why this woman had locked herself in the room with him and why she was attacking him, a complete stranger.
Yeah.
He even wondered if she might be high on drugs.
This is a natural reaction in the midst of such a chaotic and traumatic event. The mind scrambles to make sense of the senseless searching for an explanation. Any explanation for the unexplainable.
Bruce managed to get to his feet, unlocked the door, and pulled the woman towards it, trying to get her out of his room.
Okay.
As he did so, he noticed blood on his hand and left a bloody thumbprint on the doorframe.
This detail about the bloody thumbprint becomes crucial later on.
Right.
It'll highlight the lack of any physical evidence connecting the attacker to the scene apart from Bruce's own blood.
To Bruce's astonishment, the woman tried to push her way back into the room.
Oh, wow.
He couldn't close the door, and in a moment of self-preservation, pushed her away, his hand connecting with her face.
This was the closest Bruce came to acting in self-defense. Even then, his primary concern was getting her out of his room and ensuring his own safety.
Once he finally managed to lock the door, Bruce immediately called 911.
Okay.
As he waited for the police to arrive, his mind raced, trying to piece together what had just happened.
This is where the trauma truly begins to set in. That initial shock starts to wear off, replaced by a flood of emotions.
Right.
Confusion, fear, anger, and a growing sense of vulnerability.
Yeah.
All these feelings are completely normal responses to such a traumatic experience.
As he waited for the police, Bruce realized that the woman he'd encountered on the stairs was white, while he had been expecting a black female friend. This discrepancy further fueled his confusion and the possibility that the attack had been a case of mistaken identity.
This racial element adds another layer of complexity to the story.
Right.
It highlights the potential for bias and misinterpretation in how the events might be perceived by others, including the police.
Several other residents of the boarding house had witnessed the commotion and the woman leaving Bruce's room.
All right.
While they didn't see what happened inside, their accounts would later corroborate the speed and the violence of the attack.
These witness accounts are vital as they provide external validation of Bruce's story and contradict any potential claims that he might have fabricated the events.
As he waited for the police, Bruce noticed a ringing phone in his room.
Okay.
It wasn't his phone, but the attacker's, which she must have dropped during the assault.
This discovery of the attacker's phone initially offered a glimmer of hope.
Yeah.
It seemed like a tangible piece of evidence that could potentially lead to her identification and apprehension.
The police arrived quickly, but their response was far from what Bruce had hoped for.
This is where the narrative takes a truly disheartening turn.
Right.
Particularly when the circumstances don't fit neatly into preconceived notions of what constitutes a credible assault.
The first officer held up his hand, warning Bruce not to come too close, clearly concerned about getting blood on himself.
Oh, wow.
Bruce understood the precaution, but couldn't help but feel a sense of alienation in that moment.
This initial interaction sets the tone for the police's overall response, which is characterized by a detachment that borders on indifference.
Yeah.
It's a stark contrast to the raw fear and vulnerability Bruce is experiencing.
As the officers began taking his statement, Bruce recounted the events as best he could, still shaken and bleeding.
Right.
He explained that he had heard someone calling his name and had gone out into the hallway, only to be met by a complete stranger who immediately attacked him.
Bruce's account is clear and consistent, emphasizing the unprovoked nature of the assault.
Yeah, right. Bruce also mentioned the attacker's bizarre question, "Why do you keep calling me?" and his own confusion in response.
Right.
However, the officers didn't seem particularly interested in this detail,
Yeah.
perhaps dismissing it as irrelevant.
This lack of curiosity on the part of the police is a recurring theme throughout the narrative.
Yeah.
It speaks to a broader issue of systemic indifference toward victims,
Right.
particularly in cases where the circumstances don't fit neatly into preconceived notions of what constitutes a credible assault.
The police then proceeded to take statements from the witnesses, all of whom corroborated Bruce's account of the attack's swiftness and brutality.
These consistent witness testimonies should have bolstered Bruce's credibility and prompted a more thorough investigation.
Yeah.
However, the police's response remains strangely muted.
Bruce, increasingly frustrated, questioned why the police hadn't taken any photographs of the scene or of his injuries.
Yeah.
He felt like they weren't taking the situation seriously, despite the clear evidence of the violent attack.
This failure to document the scene properly is a significant lapse on the part of the police.
Yeah.
It further reinforces the sense that they are not prioritizing the investigation or treating Bruce as a legitimate victim.
Hoping to provide a lead, Bruce handed the attacker's phone to the officers, believing it might help them identify her.
This act of cooperation on Bruce's part highlights his desire for justice and his belief that the system will ultimately work in his favor.
Right.
However, this hope, as we'll see, will soon be met with bitter disappointment.
Despite the witnesses, Bruce's injuries, and the attacker's phone as evidence, the police seemed unconcerned by the lack of any physical evidence connecting the attacker to the crime scene.
This lack of concern is a recurring theme throughout the narrative.
Yeah.
It points to a systemic failure to adequately investigate and prosecute cases of assault, particularly when the victim is male and the perpetrator is female.
Right.
This is a very real and unfortunate reality in our justice system. What's so striking is that contrast between the police's dismissive attitude and just the severity of Bruce's injuries.
Yeah.
I mean, the guy's bleeding profusely. He's got visible lacerations. He's clearly in a state of distress.
Yeah.
Yet the officers seem strangely unconcerned. It's almost as if they've normalized violence to a point where a case like this doesn't even register as something out of the ordinary.
Right. It raises serious questions about their training and sensitivity.
Yeah.
When dealing with victims of trauma.
Yeah.
I mean, for Bruce, this wasn't just another day on the job for them.
No.
This was a life-altering event.
Exactly. And that disconnect, that lack of empathy,
Yeah.
it's a major hurdle for victims seeking justice.
Right.
It feeds into the feelings of being dismissed and invalidated, which can be just as damaging as the physical injuries themselves.
Bruce's account also highlights this really insidious nature of victim blaming.
Right.
Even some of the other residents at the boarding house,
Yeah.
people who knew him, questioned why he had let the woman into his room in the first place.
Wow. This is unfortunately a common reaction, and it speaks to the deeply ingrained societal biases we have about gender roles and violence. We're conditioned to think of men as the perpetrators and women as the victims.
Right.
So when a case like this challenges those assumptions, people struggle to make sense of it.
Yeah.
And sadly, that often results in blaming the victim.
Bruce's experience really serves as a stark reminder that justice is not always served.
Right.
Especially for those who are already marginalized or vulnerable.
Yeah.
And in this case, you've got a confluence of factors: his gender, the setting, the lack of traditional evidence, all working against him.
It's a sobering reminder that systems that are supposed to protect us can fail.
Right.
And when they do, it can be incredibly difficult to find the strength and the resources to fight back.
Yeah.
This is especially true for someone like Bruce.
Yes, that prior injustice adds another layer of complexity to the story.
Right? Yeah.
That had already had such a profound impact on his life.
Right.
It forced him into this precarious living situation,
Yeah.
making him even more vulnerable to exploitation and harm.
It's a classic example of how one act of betrayal can trigger a chain reaction of negative events.
Right.
Bruce was trying to rebuild his life, and then this violent, senseless attack happened.
And now he's a victim of violence.
Yeah.
It's a crushing blow, both physically and emotionally.
And this is where the concept of toxic shame becomes relevant. Bruce, despite being the victim, may start to internalize the blame and question his own worthiness.
Yeah.
This is a common response to trauma, especially when the system's meant to provide provides support and validation fail to do so.
It's heartbreaking to think about the potential long-lasting impact of these events on Bruce's life.
Yeah.
Not only did he suffer physical injuries,
Right.
but he was also left with these deep emotional scars and a profound sense of betrayal by the very systems he should have been able to trust.
Absolutely. Trauma doesn't just vanish.
Uh,
It lingers, and it can shape our perceptions,
Right.
our relationships, and our sense of self for years to come.
Yeah.
Bruce's story is a testament to the resilience of the human spirit,
Mm-hmm.
but it also underscores the urgent need for better systems of support for victims of violence and injustice.
In the immediate aftermath of the attack, Bruce is left to pick up the pieces of his life
Right.
while grappling with the trauma of what happened.
Yeah. It leaves the victim feeling powerless and unheard, compounding the trauma they've already endured.
Yeah.
And it reinforces the dangerous message that their experience wasn't important enough to warrant a proper investigation.
Bruce's story is a chilling reminder that we as a society have a responsibility to challenge victim blaming and to advocate for a more just and compassionate system
Yes.
that truly supports survivors of violence.
It's a call to action for all of us to be more aware,
Yeah.
more empathetic, and more willing to speak out against injustice wherever we see it.
Right.
We need to create a culture where victims feel safe coming forward,
Yeah.
knowing that we'll be believed, supported, and treated with dignity.
It's also a reminder that healing from trauma is a journey, not a destination.
Mm.
There will be setbacks.
Yeah,
There will be moments of despair.
right.
But with the right support, recovery is possible.
Absolutely. Trauma can affect every aspect of a person's life,
Yeah.
from their physical health to their mental well-being
Right.
to their relationships with others.
Right.
It's essential to recognize the signs of trauma and to seek professional help when needed.
Yeah.
There's no shame in reaching out for support.
Right.
And in fact, it's a sign of strength and
Yeah.
resilience.
And unfortunately, Bruce's story doesn't end there. It's a stark reminder that the fight for truth and justice can be long and arduous,
Yeah.
and that even when the odds seem stacked against us, it's essential to keep fighting for what's right.
Bruce's story is a testament to the indomitable spirit of those who refuse to be silenced.
Yeah.
It's a story of courage, resilience, and the unwavering pursuit of truth, even in the face of overwhelming adversity.
Right.
His story forces us to confront uncomfortable truths about our society
Yeah.
and the systems that are supposed to protect us.
And as we continue to delve into Bruce's story, we'll see how his determination to uncover the truth about that night leads him down a path filled with unexpected twists and turns,
Right.
further exposing the flaws in the system
Yeah.
and the challenges faced by victims seeking justice. Bruce's decision to hand over the attacker's phone to the police was really a pivotal moment in his story.
Yeah.
It seemed like a logical step towards justice,
Right.
a way to help the police identify and apprehend the woman who attacked him.
Right. There's often this underlying bias,
Yeah.
a reluctance to believe that a man could be the victim of a violent attack perpetrated by a woman.
Right.
It challenges those deeply ingrained societal norms about gender and power, and that can lead to a lack of proper investigation. The fact that the only blood present is Bruce's,
Right.
these are significant red flags that should have prompted a much more thorough and unbiased investigation.
Right. It's a chilling reminder that justice is not always blind,
Mm-hmm.
that it can be swayed by preconceived notions and societal biases.
Right.
And those biases can have a profound impact on the lives of those seeking justice.
It's a sobering reality, and that's why it's so crucial to keep sharing stories like Bruce's,
Yeah.
to shine a light on these systemic failures that allow perpetrators to escape accountability
Right.
and leave victims feeling silenced and betrayed.
Bruce's story is a testament to the incredible resilience of the human spirit,
Mm-hmm.
that enduring a brutal attack and facing a system seemingly indifferent to his plight.
Yeah. We can't be complacent in the face of injustice.
Right.
That we must continue to advocate for a more equitable and just system
Right.
that treats all victims with dignity and respect.
This deep dive into Bruce's story has exposed us to the insidious nature of injustice, the complexities of trauma,
Right.
and the importance of challenging systemic biases. It leaves us with a lot to contemplate and a renewed sense of urgency to advocate for change.
Bruce's experience serves as such a powerful reminder that we all have a role to play in creating a society where every victim is heard, believed, and supported.
Right.
We have to demand better from our systems, from our institutions, and from ourselves.
Yeah.
By fostering empathy, promoting understanding, and demanding accountability,
Right.
we can contribute to a world where justice is truly served.
Well said. I think that's a good place to wrap things up.
Yeah.
This has been a really heavy deep dive,
It has.
but an important one.
Absolutely.
Bruce's story is a reminder that we can't turn away from injustice.
Right.
We have to keep fighting for a better world. A world where everyone feels safe and protected, and where victims are truly supported.
Well said.
Thank you so much for joining me on this deep dive, and thank you to all of our listeners for tuning in.
Yeah, thank you.
Until next time, take care.